and I'm glad you're here with me. Please like this video and listen to my story till the end and let me know which city you're listening from. That way, I can see how far my story has traveled. I spent 23 years building a career I was proud of. My name is Catherine Walsh, and I worked at Meridian Financial Solutions in downtown Chicago, Illinois. I wasn't some entry-level employee coasting through. I was director of operations, the person who kept an entire company running while everyone else got the credit. When I started in 1999, I was a single mother with 2 teenagers, fresh out of a divorce, desperate for stability. I took a job as an administrative assistant, answering phones for $32,000 a year. It wasn't glamorous, but it was mine. I worked harder than anyone in that building. I stayed late, came in early, learned every system, memorized every client. When people needed something done, they came to me. When problems arose, I fixed them. When the company nearly collapsed during the 2008 financial crisis, I was the one who restructured our operations and saved 17 jobs. I wasn't just competent, I was irreplaceable, or so I thought. By 2015, I'd been promoted to Director of Operations. I managed a team of 12 people. I oversaw every major project. I had a salary of $127,000, benefits, respect. The CEO, Richard Brennan, told me regularly that I was the backbone of the company. "Catherine, I don't know what we'd do without you," he said at my 20th anniversary dinner. He gave me a crystal award that still sits on my mantle. 2 decades of excellence, it reads. I believed him, I believed all of it. My children, Michael and Sarah, were grown and thriving. Michael was a teacher in Seattle. Sarah was finishing her PhD in Boston. I'd raised them alone, put them through college, and still built a career. I was proud. I'd earned my place. But apparently none of that mattered when Richard retired 2 years ago and the board brought in new leadership. Her name was Vanessa Hartley, 39 years old, Harvard MBA, previously at some tech startup that imploded, but somehow that made her seem innovative instead of incompetent. From day one, I felt the shift. Vanessa called an all-staff meeting her second week. She wore a designer suit that probably cost more than my monthly mortgage and spoke in corporate buzzwords that meant nothing. "We're going to disrupt the paradigm," she said. "Leverage synergies, embrace agile methodology, build a culture that reflects our future, not our past." I'd been in business long enough to know what that meant. Layoffs were coming. After the meeting, I approached her professionally. "Vanessa, I'm Catherine Walsh, Director of Operations. I'd love to schedule time to walk you through how we operate and—" "I've reviewed the files," she interrupted without looking up from her phone. "I'll reach out if I need anything." That was my first warning. Over the next 6 months, Vanessa systematically dismantled everything I'd built. She brought in consultants, kids in their 20s wearing Allbirds and carrying iPads, to tell us how to do our jobs. She implemented new software without asking anyone who'd actually used the old systems. She hired her friends from her failed startup, creating redundant positions that overlapped with mine. Worst of all, she started freezing me out. At first it was subtle. "Oh, Catherine, we rescheduled that meeting, didn't anyone tell you?" Then it became obvious. I'd show up to the office and discover decisions had been made about my department without me. Calendar invites would go to everyone except me. My assistant manager, Tom, came to me worried. "Catherine, Vanessa asked me how long you've been here. When I said 23 years, she just smiled and said, 'That's a very long time to be doing the same job.'" The walls were closing in, but I told myself I was being paranoid. I had seniority. I had relationships. I had institutional knowledge nobody else possessed. I had nothing, as it turned out, except a target on my back. The ambush came on a Tuesday in March. I was called into Vanessa's office at 9:00 a.m. Her assistant, Madison, a sweet 24-year-old fresh out of college, looked at me with pity as I walked past her desk. That's when I knew something bad was about to happen. Derek Chen from HR was already in the office, sitting stiffly in one of the uncomfortable modern chairs Vanessa had bought to replace Richard's comfortable leather ones. Derek wouldn't meet my eyes. "Catherine, sit down." Vanessa's voice was flat, businesslike, cold. I sat, my hands were sweating, but I kept them folded in my lap, calm. "We need to discuss your future with Meridian," Vanessa began. "The company is evolving rapidly, and frankly, your skill set is no longer aligned with our strategic direction." I felt like I'd been slapped. "Excuse me. You've been here a long time. You've done adequate work. But we need people who understand modern business practices, who can adapt to rapid change, who bring fresh thinking and digital fluency. Adequate work, 23 years reduced to adequate. I've adapted to every change this company has faced, I said, fighting to keep my voice level. I managed our entire technology upgrade in 2015. I trained half the staff on systems they still use today. That's exactly the problem, Catherine. Vanessa leaned back in her chair like she was explaining something to a child. You're still thinking about 2015. We're planning for 2025. We need digital natives, people who grew up with this technology, not people struggling to keep up. Digital natives. I taught this woman's assistant how to use Excel 3 weeks ago. What exactly are you proposing? I asked, though I already knew. Derek cleared his throat uncomfortably. Meridian is offering you an early retirement package, very generous, 3 months severance plus continuation of benefits for 6 months. You'd leave at the end of this month. And if I decline? Vanessa's smile was ice. Then we'll need to initiate a performance improvement plan. But Catherine, let's be honest. At your age, is that really a battle you want to fight? Wouldn't it be better to retire gracefully? Spend time with your children, travel, enjoy your golden years while you still have your health. At your age. There it was, the real reason. I wasn't being pushed out because I was incompetent. I was being pushed out because I was 58 years old and Vanessa wanted younger, cheaper employees she could control. This was age discrimination, pure and simple. I could fight it. I could call an employment attorney, file a complaint, make this ugly and public. But I'd seen those battles before. They were expensive, exhausting, and companies like Meridian had deep pockets for legal defense. Even when employees won, they lost years of their lives to the stress. And if I refused this package, Vanessa would document every tiny mistake, every small delay. Until she had enough to fire me for cause, and I'd walk away with nothing. I had a mortgage. I had aging parents who needed help. My daughter Sarah still had 2 years of PhD work and was living on ramen and hope. I needed to be smart, not emotional. So I took a deep breath and did something that surprised everyone in that room. I smiled. Understood, I said calmly. I'll accept the package. Vanessa blinked, clearly shocked. She'd been prepared for tears, for arguments, for threats, not calm acceptance. Really, that's very mature of you, Catherine. Mature, just another word for old. I'll need 2 weeks to transition my responsibilities properly, I said. 1 week should be sufficient, Vanessa countered. We want to move quickly on restructuring. Of course she did. The faster I was gone, the faster she could erase my existence. Fine, 1 week. I stood up, my legs steady despite the earthquake happening inside my chest. Is there anything else? That's all, Vanessa said, already looking back at her computer like I'd ceased to exist. Derek will send you the paperwork this afternoon. I walked out of that office with my head high. I walked past Madison, who had tears in her eyes. I walked past the conference room where I'd led hundreds of meetings. I walked past my own office where photos of my kids sat next to plaques and awards from 23 years of service. I made it to my car in the parking garage before my hands started shaking. 23 years, gone just like that. I sat there for 45 minutes, gripping the steering wheel, trying to breathe through the panic. How would I tell my kids? How would I pay my bills with 3 months of severance? What was I supposed to do with the rest of my life? But beneath the fear and hurt, something else started growing, something cold and sharp and calculated. Anger. Not the hot, explosive kind, the cold, patient kind, the dangerous kind. Vanessa Hartley had just made the biggest mistake of her career. She'd underestimated me. She thought I was just some old woman who'd roll over and disappear quietly. She thought my 23 years meant nothing except outdated knowledge and resistance to change. She was wrong. Because 23 years at a company means something very specific. It means I knew everything. Every system, every client, every dirty secret, every mistake that had been quietly buried, every shortcut people had taken, every compliance issue we'd skirted, every relationship that held the company together. I was the institutional memory, and Vanessa had just pissed off the one person who could burn her entire world down. I drove home in a daze, my mind already shifting from victim to strategist. I'd spent 2 decades solving problems for other people. It was time to solve this one for myself. That evening, I sat at my kitchen table with a bottle of wine and my laptop, and I started making a list. Everything I knew, everything I'd seen, everything that could hurt Meridian and, more importantly, everything that could hurt Vanessa specifically. I knew which clients were unhappy but staying quiet. I knew which projects were disasters waiting to happen. I knew about the consulting contract that had cost $300,000 and delivered nothing but PowerPoint presentations. I knew about the compliance issues we'd been managing with creative interpretations of regulations. I knew which employees were actively job hunting because of Vanessa's toxic leadership. And I knew something Vanessa didn't know I knew. 6 months ago, I'd been accidentally copied on an email thread between Vanessa and one of her consultant friends. They'd been discussing what they called the old guard problem at Meridian, specifically me and 3 other employees over 50. The email had outlined a strategy: make our jobs difficult, exclude us from decisions, document any small mistakes, then offer early retirement before moving to termination for cause if we refused. It was age discrimination in writing, a roadmap to illegal behavior, documented and saved. I'd kept that email. At the time, I'd thought about reporting it to HR, but Derek was brand new and clearly in Vanessa's camp. I'd thought about going to the board, but what could I prove? It was just talk, just planning. Now it was execution. Now I had proof that what happened to me wasn't random, wasn't about performance. It was a calculated campaign to force out older workers. But I wasn't going to HR. I wasn't going to file a complaint. I wasn't going to hire an attorney and spend 2 years in litigation. I was going to do something much more effective. I was going to let Vanessa destroy herself, and I was going to help her do it. The next morning, I went to work with a plan. I had 1 week to transition out, and I was going to use every single day strategically. First, I scheduled meetings with every person on my team. Officially, these were transition meetings. Unofficially, I was conducting exit interviews and documenting everything that was wrong. "Tom," I said when we met in the conference room, "tell me honestly, how has it been working under Vanessa's leadership?" Tom, who'd been with me for 8 years, looked relieved to finally talk openly. "Honestly, Catherine, it's been hell. She doesn't listen to anyone. She makes decisions without understanding how things actually work. Last week she told me to change our entire client reporting system, and when I explained it would break our compliance protocols, she told me to figure it out. Figure it out, like compliance is optional." "Write that down for me," I said, sliding him a legal pad. "Everything, dates, specific examples, witnesses." He looked confused. "Why?" "Because someone needs to document what's really happening here before it's too late." I did this with all 12 members of my team. By the end of the week, I had pages and pages of documented problems: hostile work environment, retaliation against anyone who questioned her, decisions that violated company policy, ethical concerns being ignored, safety issues being dismissed. Second, I started creating a comprehensive transition document. Vanessa had told me 1 week was enough to hand off 23 years of work. Fine, I'd give her exactly what she asked for. I spent 3 days writing a 73-page document titled Operations Transition, Critical Information for Continuity. It contained everything: every client quirk, every system workaround, every unwritten rule, every relationship that made things work. But I wrote it in the most technical, convoluted way possible. I used jargon. I referenced systems by acronyms without explaining them. I made it technically accurate but practically useless unless you already understood the context. Then I gave it to Vanessa. "Here's your transition document," I said, handing her the thick printed binder. She barely glanced at it. "I'm sure my team can figure things out." Perfect, that's exactly what I wanted her to think. Third, I started reaching out to people outside the company. Old colleagues, clients I'd worked with for years, industry contacts, people who knew me and trusted me. "Hey James, it's Catherine Walsh from Meridian. I'm transitioning out of the company, wanted to touch base before I go." These conversations were gold. People told me things they'd never tell Vanessa. Clients who were unhappy but hadn't complained yet. Vendors who'd been treated poorly. Competitors who were circling, waiting for Meridian to show weakness. And I learned something very interesting about Vanessa herself. Her previous company, the tech startup that had failed, hadn't just failed. It had imploded amid accusations of fraud. Money had vanished. Employees hadn't been paid. Investors had lost everything. Vanessa had left 3 weeks before it all collapsed, landing at Meridian with a clean resume and no mention of the disaster. One of my contacts sent me a link to a lawsuit. Former employees suing the startup's leadership for unpaid wages. Vanessa's name was in the documents as Chief Operating Officer during the period in question. Nothing had been proven, no criminal charges, but the pattern was clear. Vanessa was good at talking her way into leadership positions, making aggressive changes that looked impressive initially, then leaving before the consequences caught up to her. She'd done it before, she was doing it now at Meridian, and she thought she'd get away with it again. Not this time. Fourth and most importantly, I documented everything happening in my final week. Every meeting I was excluded from, every decision made without my input, every disrespectful comment, every time I was treated like I'd already left. I kept a detailed log, dates, times, witnesses, exact quotes. And I recorded conversations. Illinois is a one-party consent state, meaning I could legally record any conversation I was part of without telling the other person. So when Vanessa made comments about my age, my outdated thinking, my inability to keep up with modern business, I had it all on tape. By Friday afternoon, my last day, I had built a file that would make any employment attorney weep with joy. But I still wasn't calling an attorney. My last day was anticlimactic. No party, no cake, no acknowledgement of 23 years of service. A few of my team members took me to lunch, clearly uncomfortable with how this was being handled. "This isn't right," Sarah from accounting whispered. "You built this place." "It is what it is," I said, smiling. "Change happens." But it wasn't fine, and change was definitely about to happen, just not the way Vanessa expected. At 4:30 p.m. I turned in my laptop, my badge, my office keys. Madison processed my exit paperwork, tears streaming down her face. "I'm so sorry," she whispered when Vanessa was out of earshot. "This is so wrong." "It's okay, Madison. Sometimes things happen for a reason." I meant it. This was happening for a reason, because I was about to teach Vanessa Hartley a lesson she'd never forget. Before I left, I knocked on Vanessa's door one last time. She looked up from her computer, surprised. "Catherine, all finished?" "Yes, I just wanted to say thank you." That caught her completely off guard. "Thank me for helping me see it was time to move on. You're right, fresh blood is important. I hope whoever replaces me works out well for you." She looked relieved, like she'd been expecting a scene. "I'm glad you're being so professional about this. Best of luck in your retirement." Retirement? I was 58 years old. I had at least 15 more working years ahead of me. "Oh, I won't need luck," I said with a smile, "but you might want to get some." I left before she could process what I meant. That weekend I didn't rest, I didn't relax, I worked harder than I'd worked in years. I compiled everything I'd gathered into a comprehensive report, not an emotional rant, not a complaint letter, a detailed professional analysis of serious problems at Meridian Financial Solutions. I documented the age discrimination with the original email, my recorded conversations, and testimony from the 3 other employees over 50 who'd been pushed out in the past year. I documented the compliance issues Vanessa was ignoring, backed up by policy documents and regulatory requirements. I documented the failing projects that were being hidden with creative accounting. I documented client dissatisfaction that was being suppressed. I documented the consulting contract that had delivered nothing, and oh, by the way, was paid to a firm where Vanessa's former business partner was a managing director. I documented employee complaints about hostile work environment and retaliation. I documented Vanessa's history at her previous company and the pending lawsuit naming her as a defendant. It was 47 pages of facts, evidence and documentation, professional, thorough, devastating. Then I sent it to 4 people. First, Richard Brennan, the retired CEO who still sat on Meridian's board. I sent it to his personal email with a subject line, "Urgent, serious concerns about Meridian's current leadership." Second, James Mitchell, the board chairman whom I'd worked with for 15 years. Third, Patricia Donovan, the longest-serving board member and head of the compliance committee. Fourth, and this was the nuclear option, I sent a modified version to the Illinois Department of Labor's Civil Rights Division and the SEC because some of what I'd found crossed into potential regulatory violations. I titled the document, Concerning Leadership Patterns and Compliance Issues at Meridian Financial Solutions, a 23-year employee's documented observations. Then I waited. It took 3 days. Richard called me Monday morning. "Catherine, what in the actual hell is going on over there?" His voice was shaking. Richard was normally calm, measured, diplomatic. I'd never heard him this angry. "Hello, Richard, did you read the report?" "I read every goddamn word. Is this all true?" "Every word. I have documentation for everything." "Vanessa pushed you out because of your age." "She pushed out 4 of us in 8 months. Me, Margaret in accounting, Stephen in client services, Tom's predecessor, everyone over 50, and she documented her plan to do it in an email 6 months ago." Jesus Christ, there was a long pause. "Catherine, the board is meeting tomorrow, emergency session, I need you there." "I'll be there." "And Catherine, bring your lawyer." "I don't have a lawyer, Richard." "Then get one, today. Because after the board sees this, Meridian is going to need to make this right, and you're going to want representation." I called an employment attorney that afternoon. Her name was Rebecca Santos, and she specialized in age discrimination cases. I'd found her through one of my industry contacts who'd gone through something similar. Rebecca's office was in a high-rise downtown. She was about 45, professional, sharp-eyed. She read my report while I sat across from her desk, watching her expression change from interested to shock to something like awe. "Catherine, this is the most well-documented case of age discrimination I've seen in 15 years of practice. The email alone would win you a lawsuit. But this," she tapped the report, "this is a nuclear bomb. You didn't just document your own case. You documented a pattern of illegal behavior, compliance violations, and potential fraud." "So I have a case." She laughed. "You have the case. Catherine, you could retire on what you'd win in court. But honestly, I don't think you'll need to sue. When the board sees this, they're going to fall all over themselves to make this go away quietly." "I don't want it to go away quietly. I want Vanessa Hartley held accountable." Rebecca smiled. "Oh, she will be, trust me. This level of documented liability, she's done. The board will cut her loose to protect the company." "Good." The emergency board meeting was held Tuesday at 2:00 p.m. in a conference room at a downtown law office, neutral territory. I arrived with Rebecca, both of us dressed professionally, carrying briefcases full of additional documentation. 6 board members were present: Richard, James, Patricia, and 3 others I'd met over the years. Vanessa was there too, sitting at the far end of the table, trying to look confident, but her face was pale. She hadn't expected me to bring a lawyer. James Mitchell called the meeting to order. He was 72, a former CEO himself, and he looked furious. "We've called this emergency session to address serious allegations made by Catherine Walsh regarding age discrimination, hostile work environment, and potential compliance violations at Meridian. Catherine, you have the floor." I'd practiced this. I'd rehearsed until I could deliver it calmly, professionally, without emotion. I walked them through everything methodically. The pattern of age discrimination, supported by Vanessa's own email. The forced retirements of 4 employees over 50 in 8 months. The recorded conversations, where Vanessa explicitly mentioned my age as a reason for termination. The hostile work environment created for senior staff. The compliance issues being ignored or hidden. The failing projects. The client complaints. The consulting contract paid to Vanessa's associate. The previous company's implosion and pending lawsuit. I had documentation for everything. Emails, recordings, sworn statements from former employees, financial records, regulatory guidelines being violated. Vanessa tried to interrupt multiple times. "This is just a disgruntled employee." "Let her finish," James said coldly. When I was done, the room was completely silent. Finally, Patricia spoke up, her voice tight with anger. "Vanessa, what's your response?" Vanessa's composure was cracking. "This is ridiculous. Catherine is bitter about a performance-based termination. She's inventing a narrative to justify." "Performance-based?" Richard interrupted. Catherine was director of operations for 8 years with consistently excellent reviews, until you arrived. Then suddenly, after 23 years of exemplary service, she's not performing. She couldn't adapt to modern business practices. Bullshit, Richard said. I'd never heard him curse. Catherine modernized this entire company's operations in 2015. She knows more about modern business practices than you've forgotten. I pulled out my phone and played the recording. Vanessa's voice came through crystal clear. At your age, do you really want to go through that stress? Wouldn't it be better to retire gracefully? The board erupted. That's age discrimination, Patricia said flatly. Textbook age discrimination, in writing, on recording, and part of a documented pattern. I never, Vanessa started. You put it in an email, James interrupted, holding up a printed copy of the 6-month-old email. You literally wrote out your plan to push out senior employees. What the hell were you thinking? That was taken out of context. What context makes this okay? He read aloud. We need to address the old guard problem. Walsh, Stevens, Chen, Margaret. They're resistant to change and their compensation packages are too high. We should make their positions uncomfortable, document performance issues, then offer early retirement. If they refuse, we move to termination for cause. You wrote that, Vanessa, your email, your plan. Vanessa went pale. For 2 hours the board grilled her. Every decision she'd made, every change she'd implemented, every person she'd pushed out. The consulting contract, the compliance shortcuts, the client complaints she'd ignored. And then they asked her to step out of the room. Rebecca leaned over. This is going well, she whispered. How can you tell? Because they're not even pretending to defend her anymore. They're calculating liability. 20 minutes later, Vanessa was called back in. James delivered the news. Vanessa, the board has voted unanimously to terminate your employment with Meridian Financial Solutions, effective immediately. You'll be escorted out today. We'll discuss severance terms with your attorney. Vanessa's face went white, then red. You can't. We can and we are. You've exposed this company to massive legal liability through your discriminatory practices. You've violated multiple company policies. You've created a hostile work environment. And you've damaged client relationships. You're done. Vanessa looked at me then, and her expression was pure hatred. This is your fault. No, I said calmly. This is your fault, I just documented it. She stormed out. 2 security guards followed her to collect her belongings and escort her from the building. Then the board turned to me. Catherine, James said, we owe you an apology, a massive apology. What happened to you should never have happened. We failed in our oversight and you paid the price. Yes, you did, I agreed. We'd like to make this right. Rebecca, perhaps you and I should discuss terms. What followed was 3 hours of negotiation. Rebecca was brilliant. She didn't just ask for money. She demanded accountability, policy changes, and justice. By the end, we had an agreement. Financial settlement, 1 year's salary, $127,000, plus an additional $200,000 in damages. Benefits, full health insurance for 5 years or until I was eligible for Medicare. Education fund, $150,000 toward my daughter Sarah's remaining graduate school costs. Consulting contract, 6 months at my former salary to help transition operations and train my replacement, someone I would help select. Public acknowledgement, a company-wide email acknowledging my contributions and correcting the record on my departure. Policy changes, new anti-discrimination training, oversight of executive decisions and whistleblower protections. And the most important term, a written admission that my termination was improper and not based on performance. Rebecca also negotiated the reinstatement of the 3 other employees Vanessa had forced out, with back pay and apologies. I signed the agreement Wednesday afternoon. Thursday morning, I walked back into Meridian Financial Solutions as a paid consultant with an office, a parking space, and direct access to the board. The looks on people's faces when they saw me were priceless. Madison actually screamed with joy, "Catherine, you're back." My team surrounded me. Tom was crying. "We thought we'd lost you." "You did," I said, "but I found my way back and we have work to do." My first task was helping undo the damage Vanessa had caused. We brought back Margaret and Stephen with promotions and apologies. We fixed the client relationships. We addressed the compliance issues before they became legal problems. We cancelled the useless consulting contract and reallocated that money to actual improvements. The young employees Vanessa had brought in, most of them were actually talented people who'd just been poorly led. With proper mentorship, they thrived. And I helped hire my replacement, not to push me out this time, but because I genuinely wanted to transition to part-time work. Her name was Jennifer Martinez, 48 years old, 15 years of experience, laid off during COVID and hungry for a chance to prove herself. "Welcome to Meridian," I told her on her first day. "Let me teach you everything I know." 6 months passed. My consulting contract ended, but I was offered a permanent position as senior advisor to operations, 20 hours a week, perfect for my life. I accepted. Vanessa, meanwhile, had disappeared from the industry. Word spread fast in Chicago's business community. No one would hire someone with her track record. Her LinkedIn went quiet. I heard she'd moved to another state, taken a job outside her field entirely. I didn't feel sorry for her. One afternoon, about a year after that Tuesday meeting in Vanessa's office, I was having lunch with Richard, who'd become a real friend through all this. "You know what I never understood?" he asked. "Why you didn't just sue them immediately when it happened? You had the evidence." "Because lawsuits are slow, expensive, uncertain. Even when you win, you lose years of your life to litigation, and companies have resources to drag things out forever." "So you went to the board instead?" "I went to the board because they had the most to lose. A lawsuit would have been bad publicity and money, but an SEC investigation, DOL complaints, regulatory violations, that's existential. They had to act fast and act decisively." Richard shook his head admiringly. "It was brilliant, ruthless but brilliant." "Not ruthless, strategic, there's a difference." And I meant it. I hadn't destroyed Vanessa out of personal revenge. I'd held her accountable for illegal behavior that hurt multiple people. There's a difference between revenge and justice. Looking back now, 2 years later, I understand what that Tuesday morning gave me. It gave me clarity. It showed me that loyalty means nothing if the people in power don't value you. It taught me that age isn't a weakness, it's a weapon. Experience, institutional knowledge, relationships, these things matter, and they can destroy people who underestimate them. It proved that the best response to discrimination isn't emotional, it's methodical. Document, strategize, strike precisely. And it showed me something crucial. When someone underestimates you because of your age, your gender, your appearance, they're giving you a gift. They're not paying attention. And when people aren't paying attention, that's when you win. I'm 60 now. I'm still working on my own terms, doing meaningful work with people who respect me. Sarah graduated debt-free, got her PhD, now teaches at Northwestern. Michael visits from Seattle regularly. My mortgage is paid off. I'm financially secure. And I've become something of a legend. Other women facing age discrimination reach out, asking for advice. I tell them all the same thing. Document everything. Know your worth, build your case. Don't fight emotionally, fight strategically. And never, ever let someone make you feel obsolete just because they're threatened by your competence. The world tells older women to accept diminished status gracefully, to fade quietly into the background. I'm here to tell you, don't. Be strategic, be relentless, be patient, and when the moment comes, be devastating. So that's my story. My boss tried to push me out because of my age, and I fought back in a way she never saw coming. What would you have done? Would you have sued immediately? Would you have walked away? Would you have fought differently? Drop a comment and let me know. And if this resonated with you, if you've faced ageism or been underestimated, you're not alone. Hit that subscribe button for more stories about fighting back, standing your ground, and winning when everyone counts you out. Thank you for listening to my story, and remember, you're never too old to be dangerous, especially when you know where the bodies are buried.